Well, hello, hello. Hello, hello, and good morning to you. And thank you for participating today in this conversational AI and contact center innovation summit. We've got a really robust and insightful panel speaker. I mean, a lot of things going on that I think you're going to enjoy today. And while you're here, I think it would be a good idea for you to go ahead and just get familiar with the chat, get familiar with the Q&A. Go ahead and start populating those as we're going through these sessions. We'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. But first of all, I want to introduce myself before we get going into it. My name is Jim Rimbach. I am the president of Call Center Coach. I've been in the contact center industry for approaching 3 decades, as you can tell by looking at this age. And I have had the opportunity to manage single site, multi-site, working in remote, operations, as well as being in actual sites, and have always been focused in on what's next and helping people to be able to implement what's next. And that's one reason why I'm so excited about being your host and moderating today's event. So this intersection of people, process, and technology is something that we've been talking about for a very, very, very long time. So what we're going to do is we're going to open with a keynote in how to build an AI-ready contact center, practical, actionable, and grounded in what's working right now. And from there, I'll be sitting down with Chris Arnold for a fireside chat on how the contact center operating model is fundamentally reversing and what that means for teams on the ground. And to close our panel, Reinventing the Contact Center from Automation to AI-Driven Customer Operations, will bring together 3 incredible leaders to explore what it really takes to drive this transformation. And of course, all of this is possible because of our event partner, ASAP, for them helping us to make these meaningful conversations possible, and to Techsommet for bringing this community together. A warm welcome to everyone joining us today, and we're glad you're here. Please keep your questions coming, as I had mentioned, in the chat or in the Q&A throughout the session. The more you engage, the richer the conversation actually will be for all of us. So make sure you're participating. So let's move on and get forward and introduce our keynote speaker, Hithan Kamdar. Hithan, are you there?
Good
There
morning.
we go. Good morning, sir. Okay, so when you start talking about actually making these changes within the organization, we're not talking about theory. And transformation, is something that you've been executing for a while. So as the director of ambulatory contact center at Henry Ford Health, you lead a team of over 350 serving the critical front door for the health system. And you have hands-on experience at deploying AI, agent assist, launching omni-channel workflows, and driving real efficiency at scale. And so when you start talking about this diverse background with roles spanning the Mayo Clinic and General Motors and 3 advanced degrees and 19 US patents, maybe we'll get into what some of those are. We would love to hear more about how you have been able to automate smarter, not harder, and building an AI-ready contact center. Hithan, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me today. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. So good morning. Thanks for having me. My name is, as Jim said, my name is Ethan Kamdar. I want to spend a little time today sharing what my AI journey has looked like inside the contact center, really not in theory, but in operations, and what you can take from this. As we know, every contact center leader is being told the same thing right now. Automate more. More bots, more workflow, more AI. But automation by itself does not fix broken access, fragmented workflows, or exhausted teams. And in healthcare, it can actually make the patient journey worse. Today, I want to talk about what it really means to build an AI-ready contact center and why the future does not belong to organizations that automate the most, but the ones that automate smarter. So here's how we'll spend our time this morning. First, we'll look at common ways automation goes wrong. Then we'll walk through a practical framework for AI readiness. After that, I'll share what leaders can do next week. And finally, I'll leave you with a vision of what an AI-ready contact center really looks like. So let's get started. Let's start with the story. A patient trying to schedule an urgent cardiology follow-up doesn't care whether the workflow is handled by a human, a bot, or AI. They care that it's easy, that it's fast, and it's right the first time with the right provider at the right location at the right time that works for the patient. What I've seen across healthcare is that we keep adding automation on top of systems that were already hard to navigate. And when that happens, automation doesn't reduce friction, it amplifies it. And that's why automation on its own is no longer the differentiator. Intelligent workflow design is. This is what most AI strategies look like. We speed up the belt without fixing the cracks underneath. And that leads to frustration for your customers and for your employees. There are three common mistakes that show up again and again. First, automating bad processes. AI layered on top of broken workflows doesn't fix anything. It just scales the friction. With duplicate handoffs, multiple authentication steps, siloed scheduling logic, disconnected CRM and EHR workflows. When this happens, customers stop trusting the solution. The second mistake is containment over resolution. We celebrate deflection of interactions instead of what's really important, focusing on outcomes. But as we all know, unresolved deflection shows up as repeat calls for the same issue, unnecessary transfers, and contact abandonment. The KPIs just the KPI can't just be to add more bots. The KPI has to be effortless resolution. The third mistake is ignoring workforce readiness. An AI-ready contact center is not just a tech stack or the latest trend. It's a workforce that is trained to supervise, escalate, and continuously improve AI outcomes. That means redesign, onboarding, AI literacy, supervisor coaching, and modernization of QA. Because if your employees don't understand how AI helps their workflow, they'll resist it, and adoption will just stall. So let's talk about how to avoid these mistakes and what it actually takes to be ready. I frame this with what I call the 4 pillars of an AI-ready contact center. And keep in mind, as we walk through them, AI readiness is not a tooling problem, it's a system maturity problem. The first pillar is workforce intelligence. This is where AI actually gets embedded through authentication, routing, intent recognition, next best action, documentation, and after call work. If the workflow itself isn't intelligent, AI doesn't create value. It just amplifies the waste. This is the foundation. If this pillar is weak, the rest will struggle. The second pillar is human and AI orchestration. This is where AI supports people in the moment. Real-time guidance, knowledge surfacing, documentation suggestions, sentiment alerts, and better escalation decisions. In my experience, the first two pillars are where AI delivers the most value today. And as models continue to improve, this layer will only get stronger. The third pillar is data governance and measurement. What you measure determines what you automate. AI-ready centers focus on contact resolution, deflection, and stays resolved, transfer rates, schedule success, no-shows, and speed to appointment. Without measurement, it's impossible to know whether your solutions are actually working. And the fourth pillar is workforce redesign. New workflows require new roles, new onboarding, different coaching models, modern QA, and clear governance. This is what turns adoption into sustainability. And really, when all four pillars work together, that's where the biggest ROI shows up. Not in flashy surface tools, but in an invisible automation embedded inside your workflow. So if you're a leader listening to this, I'm sure the question becomes, well, what should I do next week? Here are some things that you can do. First, map that friction, not just your volume. Really look at where do customers struggle and stop asking where are the calls coming from. Look at the resolution, having to repeat efforts, or where they get handed off. From there, identify high frequency, low complexity work. These are often the best early automation targets. They give you quick momentum and credible buy-in from both your customers and your employees. Third, redesign your handoffs. Human to bot and bot to human transition should escalate within context, not reset the conversation. We've all lived through multiple contact center evolutions, and the cross channels or bots, most frustrating thing for customers is having to restate what they've already shared. And fourth, create governance. Align your operations teams, your IT, your compliance, analytics, and business owners around shared decisions. Because AI without governance becomes fragmentation at scale. And governance is what allows the organization to truly get behind and sustain the work you're trying to accomplish with AI. I want to close by reframing what AI readiness really means. The AI ready contact center is not defined by how much work we do or how much work machines really do. It's defined by how effortlessly customers get what they need and how empowered employees feel delivering it. I'm going to say that again. It's defined by how effortlessly customers get what they need and how empowered employees feel in delivering it. This is the shift leaders have to make from automation volume to outcome quality. When the workforce discipline is strong, intelligence can be applied in the right places. When intelligence is applied well, teams can show real empathy instead of fighting systems. And when customers experience consistency and resolution, trust follows. The winners in the next decade won't be the contact centers that automate the most. They'll be the ones that combine intelligence, empathy, workflow discipline, and trust. AI readiness isn't about replacing people, it's about building systems that let people and technology do their best work together. I'm going to say that again because I think that's important. It's about building systems that let people and technology do their best work together. That's what it means to automate smarter, not harder. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions and see how this plays out in your environment. Check the chat here, see if there's any questions that have come through. One of the questions in here, you said most contact centers automate the wrong things. What's the most common mistakes you've seen companies make when implementing AI? I think from my experience, what I've seen most contact centers, when they automate the things that are already broken, as I said, if you have a workflow or a design that just doesn't work for your customers or your employees, and then you just take that process flow and you start to automate that, that's not going to give you your best solution, right? You really need to look at the process improvement first, and then look at how AI can help to embed and make that solution possible.
Nathan, very, very enlightening, and thanks for jumping in on the Q&A while we were getting back online here. You know, as you were chatting and showing your slides, I started thinking about um, going across a creek on stepping stones, right? And as I was looking at what you had, to me, it was already like 5 steps in, because I started thinking about some of the things when you are referring to readiness in regards to, like, for example, setting the correct executive expectation, because they're getting exposed to a lot of information about AI, the impacts, and all of that. How did you handle that in your organization?
Yeah, really, it's about having the conversation up front to say, here's where our current processes are, and here are the things that we can learn from our current processes. And once we fix our processes, and having the voice of the customer is key in this conversation, right? Is really knowing what your customers want, surveying them, having some input in that data. And that data is important for the executives then to be able to see and show where the measurement value is to make those changes and automate those workflows that can work simple for customers.
So, did you find yourself talking about that, you know, expectation setting for executive level folks, and talking about, making sure that our processes are solid, that, we don't magnify things that are going to cause, additional patient experience problems, and all of that? Is did Was that an easy conversation, or did you have to bring evidence, case study information to be able to say, okay, here's in other words, a path that has been successful for others?
Yeah, I would say it's a journey, right? It takes time to get people to buy in and see what that looks like. I've always referred to jokingly as the safari. You don't know where the bears and the lions and everyone are going to come from, right? And ask you all these questions, and you kind of feel like you're in the middle of this and are trying to put them at bay. But it's really having that structured conversation and having all the data to back up and show exactly what's needed for that evolution.
Yeah, so we have to get all of our ingredients together before we start the cooking process, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Then the other part is, okay, so executive expectations and being able to manage those, call those, guide those, is of course the agent piece. And I think, like, for this week, Oracle, I think Oracle comes out and they said they cut 30,000 jobs or something. And we hear about this stuff all the time. And so, employees are sitting there and saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm next," right? And that fear mechanism is something that I suspect that we're always going to have to manage, right? And we always have to be proactive with it, because if we think that those conversations aren't happening either inside the head or inside the break room, that's naive. So how do you manage the whole agent readiness process?
Yeah, the conversation with our agents really is around having having them understand that AI is a tool to help them in their work as opposed to a job eliminator. That's the way I've always positioned AI and looked at AI. It's not to reduce the number of heads that we need, but to have them do the highest value care that they can provide. In healthcare, we always talk about having people work to the highest scope of their licensure. And it's the same thing for our call center agents, right? We want them to work to the highest scope of what they're capable of doing. And that's where the AI can come in and help assist in that space, as opposed to saying the AI is going to come in and eliminate your role.
Sounds to me like, as I read through a lot of the, as they say, read the tea leaves, you already had a strong culture in your organization to begin with. So tell us a
Yes, we
little bit
did.
about tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really about making sure people understand how they fit into the whole system, right? I've had the opportunity, as you described, to work across multiple systems, and it's really having people understand, especially your call center agents who are your first line in the what we call our digital front door, and having them understand they're the first place that anybody is calling to have that brand experience so that they understand and they feel connected to our brand and that they understand that, my work matters and what I say to the patient or the consumer is going to make a difference for whether they choose us for care or they go to our competitor down the street.
Okay, so awesome insight and information, and it really makes your four pillars more relatable and human. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so going back to a couple questions that we have is, um, somebody submitted and said, how do you automate accessibility for the disabled or disability community?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we've been doing is having focused conversations with that group and saying, what are the things that you struggle with the most in getting an appointment or having a conversation? And once we have enough data in that space, we're early in our journey here, but once we have enough data in that space, we can then go back and say, here's what the workflow looks like for this community, and we can start to look at how to automate that for this particular community.
So a lot of us here, when we start talking about AI and success and effectiveness and impact, is making sure that we always have the human in the middle. When I look at your pillars, I saw that in several different places. But I'd like to get your thoughts and opinions on what human in the middle means to you.
Yeah, it truly is that. It's putting in our industry, we call it putting the patient at the center of the equation. So really thinking about it from that perspective, we're all consumers of healthcare, right? So we have the ability to really think about our services in the aspect of if we were to consume it or our parents or our children, and how would that experience feel to us? And how do we ensure that whatever we do in making the process better is going to help the patient ultimately or the consumer ultimately in that journey that they go on?
Nathan, awesome insight. Thank you for sharing it with us. Now, the clarity and depth that you've gone through is significantly more than the few slides that you just shared. So, if somebody is going through this journey and process with you, and they'd love to have additional insights from you, and they wanted to reach out, how do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Contact me on LinkedIn and I'm happy to connect and have some more conversations.
Nathan, thank you very much for sharing that. And we look forward to seeing you soon. And thank you for participating in this session today and actually driving this session today. So thank you. So now we're
Absolutely.
going to
Thanks.
transition into a fireside chat. And so we're going to bring on our next speaker, Chris Arnold. And we're going to have now fireside for me and for some of you. If you want to go ahead and bring s'mores, graham crackers, and some chocolate, I'll give you my home address to send me my share. Um, Same thing again. Make sure that you're doing the Q&A and leveraging that. So I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have with Chris because we share some similar backgrounds in regards to our journey in the contact center space, although Chris was an agent. So I had the opportunity when I got into the contact center working for a retail operation. And when I went into the contact center, I actually came in as a supervisor. So that progression from the front line to moving to where Chris ended up, and he's going to share a little bit about this, really gives us very different perspectives in regards to where we are today and some of the things that all of us, have to contend with in regards to change, and being creative and innovative and really learning new routines and new thinking. So most contact centers really operate on a simple assumption is that humans deliver service and AI supports. And that assumption, as Chris says, is breaking. AI agents are now resolving a growing share of interactions independently, shifting human roles from frontline execution to exception handling and continuous optimization. And he says the model's reversing. And human judgment doesn't disappear, it moves upstream, shaping how machine intelligence performs across every interaction. So, what does it take to actually operate in this new reality that if we're not there yet in your if you're not there yet in your operation, it's coming. How do you scale automation without losing control, actually gaining better control? And so the blend of human connection and machine intelligence to deliver better experiences at lower cost is possible, but how do we do that? And that's exactly what we're going to find out. So Chris Arnold is the VP of Contact Center Strategy at ASAPP. Chris, great to have you. Thanks for joining
Hey,
us.
hey, thank you, Jim. It's an honor to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Same here. So tell us, I think for all of us, much like I introduced and started talking about your journey. If you could just take a quick minute and talk about where that journey was. So I started as an agent here, and then I moved it up to here.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess it was the year 2000, so 26 years ago, as painful as that is to say. I started out while I was in college. I started out as an agent on the phone. It offered the most flexible schedule and gave me the opportunity to go to school full time. And I was actually working full time. And so there were a lot of life lessons in that by itself. But, you know, never had a plan to work in the contact center space my entire professional career, but that's how it ended up. They offered me a leadership position as soon as I graduated from college, and off to the races we went. And over those 20 years, I did virtually every job in the contact center from lead to supervisor, manager, director, all of the frontline roles, sort of climbing the ladder, if you will. Got into process optimization. So we worked over the years with a lot of Six Sigma, trying to identify, the leaks, if you will, the inefficiencies that exist in every business. And along the way, I got involved in retail. So that's another thing you and I share. We've worked very closely on with the customer in various, different departments, if you will, for a long time. And then my last role while at Verizon, I managed all the contact center technology. So I bought a lot of great and a lot of not so great technology over the years. And part of that was I had an opportunity to work with ASAP while still at Verizon. And then when I decided to leave Verizon, I wanted to do something really different. So I made the leap to a startup called ASAP. We were doing things like messaging platforms and virtual agents, a lot of those legacy technologies that we're not going to spend a lot of time on today. But I've had the opportunity to sort of work on both sides of the fence. I spent most of my career as an operator, so I've walked quite a few miles in those shoes. And now I've worked on the technology side for the past 6 years, which has obviously been very exciting.
So, first of all, ASAP. Yes, I said ASAPP because I was actually reading this little thing because I wanted to make sure I got it right and I didn't. So, apologize for that. So, ASAP, thank you again for your sponsorship. Um, when we start talking about this flipping and this moving of the service model and this transition, again, if we're not doing it in the midst of it now or preparing for it, it's coming. Um, is what signals tell you that this is a structural shift in the service model and not just one of those technology solutions that you said you purchased, some good, some not so good.
Yeah, for sure. If you think about where we've come from, there's been lots of innovation in the contact, broader CX space for pretty much all of our careers. And we've applied those technologies and they've never really delivered on the transformational outcomes. Buzzwords like omni-channel, those dreams have never been realized. They've remained dreams. And so when you think about sort of how contact centers have been structured since I was an agent on the phone, it's very workforce focused. Rightfully so, you have massive amounts of interactions coming in, and it's almost like a production line where call or chat comes in, it has to be processed. Hopefully, you achieve first contact resolution. Many times we don't. Customer leaves unhappy, rinse and repeat. And through that, you're dealing, as an operator, you're dealing with large amounts of agent absenteeism. Attrition has you on the sort of treadmill of constantly replacing and training new hires who really aren't great at their job yet. And so it's been this way for 20 years. And so the structural shift that I'm seeing goes way beyond the technology. Technology is a critical enabler, but we are shifting from what I would say, this labor optimization problem, dealing with absenteeism and attrition and replacing those agents constantly to try to keep up with growing volumes of customer concerns. It's rapidly becoming what I call a system design challenge. And I'll say more about this as we go, but in the past, it's how many people do we need to handle this volume at the lowest cost? Keep in mind, lowest cost, because we know that this is the world that we live in. We're constantly trying to lower cost. Whereas where we are today and where we're headed with agentic AI, it's more about how do we design a system that consistently delivers the best possible customer outcomes for both customers and the business? So we're not trying to optimize for one over the other. This is really the first time in my career where we can have both. You can optimize for cost while also improving satisfaction. And there's always been that sort of trade-off. And so now we're really focused on how do we orchestrate this hybrid system of AI agents, the human experts that still know our business better than anybody, the workflows, you think about processes that need to be optimized, and all the decision logic that helps you avoid a lot of the pitfalls that you hear about AI still in the media. I think those are the largest signals, and it really comes down to how do we optimize the human side of the equation with these really powerful new AI tools.
So, I mean, there's something that you hit on there a second ago that I think is really interesting when we start looking at the expectation, positioning, strategic thinking is so for me, what I have noticed when we start talking about the people at the highest level of organization, whether it's a board, C-level, if you're a traded company, is the strategic positioning of the contact center has changed and is continuing to change. Meaning, if I go back, talking about in our early days, all of those contact center people at the telecom were considered back office, right? It's the cost of doing business, and for many industries, it's always been that way. Finance, insurance, utilities. I mean, it goes on and on and on. However, I think with a lot of the changes in regards to deregulation, information, going through COVID, we started looking at the contact center. It's like, oh my gosh, that's a relationship hub. And so when you start talking about that thinking at the highest levels of organizations, do you think that's also driving some of this?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think enterprises of all shapes and sizes are sort of waking up to what they've sort of left on the table for so long. Contact center is just a very rich place, not only for insights, but I'm seeing a pretty rapid shift away from sort of it becoming the cost center or being the cost center to more of a value center where they're realizing with some of these technologies and the data that really drives it, you can really start to find new sort of pots of gold that come in the form of not only preserving existing revenue, but driving new revenue functions. And I'll talk a little bit about what some of those metrics look like. But yeah, there is definitely a shift happening in how the C-suite and the board sees the contact center, because in the past they've seen this massive, expense line on the P&L. And that's quickly changing.
Okay, so when AI agents autonomously resolve most intents, and maybe you can even talk about single intent and multi intent, what fundamentally changes in how contact center leaders should be thinking about designing their contact centers?
Yeah, what I'm saying, and you use the word design. That's a key word because we don't often do this. In our world, we have often sort of flown by the seat of our pants, you might say, and rightfully so, because we're dealing with real-time, massive amounts, sometimes spikes in volume, and so we're firefighting all day long. What I'm seeing CX leaders and contact center leaders are a big part of that, but we know CX encompasses a lot more than just the contact center. But what I'm seeing pretty rapidly in the deployment of these agentic solutions is that CX leaders are thinking more like product owners and system architects more than workforce managers. So I'm seeing us less focused on replacing the countless agents that are leaving, and we're standing up new agentic AI that doesn't take a day off, isn't absent or late for work, doesn't attrit. And so we're now able to optimize these AI agents to do all the things that we've hoped the legacy technologies could do. You think about the virtual assistants, those deterministic flows, CRMs, IVRs, all the things we've invested in could not deliver on what we're seeing today, but it requires us to think differently and to lay a foundation that you and I will talk a little bit more about. It's not just go throw technology at the problem and think it's going to solve all your problems. There's a lot more to this.
Well, and okay, so you hit on something, even talking with Hithan, that I think if we're not careful, it will be a very slippery slope in what you were just talking about, and that is, I think the labor model will shift from I have, talking about attrition, is that, well, maybe I don't need to replace it. However, I think from an escalation perspective, um, at some point that transition to human, that handoff, and all of that to something that is more complex, I think it's going to change in regards to our expectations and the capabilities and aptitudes and training and development and retention of the people who are handling those calls as they're coming in. And I think that's a design model that needs to be addressed as well. Would you say?
Sure, absolutely. I think when I think about all of this, I think the end goal in mind is to make the highest use of all available data, systems, all the things that we've invested in and we haven't made great use. Data is a great example of we've had mountains of data, but we've never really done anything meaningful with it other than create reporting for an ops review or, something along those lines, measuring volumes and transfers and we've never really moved the CX needle with that. But now we can use all of these investments in a manner that eliminates customer friction, that's often caused by these sort of department silos that exist in every business. But to do so in a way that leads to these safe and predictable and increasingly valuable outcomes. And this is where the workforce is going to shift, from many low skill roles to fewer and more specialized ones, which we can talk more about.
And we're seeing that in a lot of different types of industries outside of the contact center that have adopted AI sooner than we have as an entire industry. So the proof is already there in the case studies. All right, I want to stop and take a pause and make sure that you're actually using the Q&A, because you can actually submit those questions and we'll get to them if we can, when we can. I want to drill down a little bit deeper, Chris, talking about AI and handling a larger share of customer, intents, and the question becomes, what do humans focus on that creates the most value?
I think the future of CX is not going to center on human agents. And it's not sort of buying into the hype that we've heard for far too long about AI is coming for our jobs, but it's really thinking about how is between the artificial intelligence capabilities, the data and the systems that create the agentic capabilities that actually solve business problems, plus the human. how do we get the most out of this new operating system? And I think the shift is going to be where the focus is going to be more on designing and building and orchestrating an intelligent service system. Again, not just bolting on this pretty cool new AI feature and hoping it moves the needle. That's how we've done things in the past. But we're now taking the humans in the workforce, you mentioned back office operations before, they have a critical role when they've got AI on their desktop. And we're now blending this AI and human capabilities, and we're continuously learning from every interaction. So historically, you've got QA analysts that have sort of listened to 2 or 3% of the interactions. They've subjectively scored them, and they hope that supervisors or other leaders are coaching to ultimately create better outcomes in the future. Well, now with these tools, we have the opportunity to learn from 100% of the interactions. And now we're going to start optimizing for both customer resolution, which we know resolution is what drives satisfaction. Reducing customer effort is critical, and a range of other business outcomes. So again, it's not either or, it's both. And this is going to create a suite of all new metrics where at the end of the day, the core answer to your question is really this evolution from workforce management to AI first service system design management.
You bring up a really interesting point. At Call Center Coach, we've actually built a glossary in regards to leadership and where we are in this AI world, and the number of new things associated with context and understanding, definitions. It's opened up a whole new world of thinking that we just have not been exposed to before, and we have to change the way we approach and design and solve. And I think we're going to have a lot of things come into question when we start talking about what has been deemed as best practices. Because if we actually peel back the onion and thinking about best practices, really what they are is just common. So we have to be really, really mindful of common practices that are actually stamped as best when we start talking about where we're going right now. And so that leads me into thinking about, and I've heard you talk before about process owner, performance owner, AI performance owner. So tell us a little bit about what does an AI performance owner role look like in practice, and who owns it?
Yeah, if you think of when I work with enterprises of all shapes and sizes over the last 5 or 6 years, and many of them have the same sort of systemic issues. You grow a large business, you're going to have departmental silos. Those departmental silos have their own unique goals, what I call local goals, that obviously sometimes they conflict, and the contact center sits downstream from all of that and sort of plays cleanup, because marketing wanted one thing, sales wanted another. The customer was actually asking for something else. They got one answer from the mobile app or the website that contradicts with what they heard from, the sales rep or the contact center. So there's all this fragmentation, which is ultimately friction. And so we're at this moment in time where we have this, what I call a transformational opportunity. And I know we've heard that word a million times, but if we do this right, we can eliminate all of that silo, all of that fragmentation that's largely driven by our organizational structures. But it's going to require sort of the performance to be owned by sort of this, what I call an AI governance council. And we'll unpack this a little bit, but there's few times in our careers where you can really get unwavering support from the C-suite or the board. Virtually every board and C-suite in the world is asking, what's our AI strategy? And so when you think about an AI performance owner, the individual owner will most often be the individual that's most responsible for customer outcomes. So think your chief experience officer, chief customer officer, someone in the C-suite. And underneath that, there's going to be these new cross-functional leadership roles that sit above individual teams and help orchestrate the system as a whole. Otherwise, every one of those departments will be deploying their own agents, and those agents will not be optimized for the enterprise goals. They will be optimized for those local departmental objectives, and that's not going to get us to the promised land. So in a word, this is what I call AI governance. So it really falls into three primary functions. You've got the AI service product management, which is really the managing the whole roadmap for the agents across the enterprise. There's an orchestration that needs to happen to make sure we're all rowing in the same direction rather than by our individual silos. And then you've got the AI operations architecture, which is more on the technology side, and they're designing the system at scale. So we're not optimizing for one department, one queue, one skill group. This is overseeing the channel orchestration, the integration points that are so critical to make sure you've got the right data. The data is, well sanitized. You've got the right APIs into the back-end systems that help us facilitate transactions. And then, of course, there's vendor ecosystems that ensure this entire thing works together. I had a former boss that said, it only works if it all works. And so you require some governance. And then, we understand the importance of the people in this equation. The workforce modernization focuses on the human side of the transformation. This isn't about replacing humans. This is about elevating the work we do. And this part of the organization, part of the governance, is defining new roles, driving the reskilling or upskilling programs, and is managing productivity and morale during the transition. Communication is a critical factor. And I would say that without this type of oversight, AI agents will unknowingly compete with one another, prioritizing those local goals over optimal enterprise outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So for me, as we think about all of the roles within an organization, and we have all these job descriptions, and we have all of these, the same thing's going to apply for all of these AI agents. One of the things that we've been working on in Call Center Coach is what we call the kinetic chain of execution. Now, for those who are familiar with a kinetic chain in body movement, the same thing's going to apply with this transformation that we're going through in regards to this redesign and all that. It's all these things have to fit and flow. It is a system. You talked about a system design challenge. Absolutely. So the kinetic chain of execution, alignment, clarity, is going to lead to our ability to have the impact that we want for both the company and the customer. So, I mean, spot on, and I appreciate you sharing all that. So if someone owns AI performance operationally, the next question becomes, how do they actually measure whether the system is doing the job well? And how should leaders think about measuring success? You had talked about that, new metrics.
Yeah, for sure. I think this one's critical because if you're going to go about this transformation, there's things that will be unlocked that we've wanted to do in the past. And we've managed a sort of a workforce centric contact center in the past. And out of that has been things, like I said before, measuring volumes and, average speed of answer, average handle time, all the things that we've come to really hate. And they don't really move the needle on customer experience, but we've been optimizing for cost for as long as I've been around. And when you think about this new service model, with agentic AI at the center, you can't measure this agentic system using labor-centric metrics. Staffing efficiency is no longer the central issue in contact center performance for all the reasons I already mentioned. So those traditional KPIs, AHT, occupancy, adherence, they're really designed for human efficiency, not system effectiveness. And in an AI-driven environment, they quickly become very misleading. And so just to throw out maybe a few potential new metrics, this is evolving very rapidly, but automation containment rate is probably the most familiar. We've been striving for containment, but we were doing it with a very limited system with very limited visibility. We didn't have true containment visibility because customer starts in one channel, doesn't get what they need, leaves, goes to another channel, whether that be the voice channel, the retail store. They showed up somewhere else. Well, it looked like it got contained because the customer ended the chat. And so now with automation containment rate, we have done correctly. We have visibility across all channels, and we can really answer the question, did the customer get the answer to their question? Was their issue resolved? First time, which leads to the next one within that resolution. What was the quality of it? How well did the AI answer the questions? Was there bias present? Were there other potential issues, things that need to be maybe modified and optimized to make the next interaction with that agent even better? And then considering sort of how AI works with humans. In the past, we've been 100% either or. It's either the human agent or the automation. There wasn't this world where it was both. And so, in a world where the agentic AI can hold down a very good conversation with the customer, but it needs some help sometimes along the way, an escalation intelligence rate is a new metric that's emerging where did the AI escalate at the right time? Did it stay within its guardrails? What was the quality of the response that the agent, the human agent, provided to the AI so the AI could continue on with the conversation? And then that leads into customer effort reduction, and you can get into, there's still cost metrics, but let's look at cost per resolved and let's see what it's costing us to resolve these interactions on the first try. Of course, we're still looking at our overall OpEx budget, but over time, you will be able to take sort of the cumulative of all of these. And the one I'm most excited about is lifetime value. And it ties back to what I said before. Lifetime value done correctly captures, yes, the cost of serving a customer or maybe a cohort of customers, but it also captures the value created. Was I able to retain that customer and maintain the existing revenue? Or was I able to upsell or cross-sell that customer through this conversation and drive some incremental new revenue? We've never done this in the contact center before, but I'm seeing it start to happen. So customer lifetime value, starting to attribute some of the sort of business value back to the contact center is quickly coming our way. And all of this elevates the CX, for the contact center and unlocks sort of how the contact center creates new value.
Okay, so Hathan, for those of you who had the opportunity to actually listen into him, he talked about some of the things that were, potential pitfalls for us that we had to be mindful of. And, you working with different organizations, you can actually, see some of the things that they're finding as pitfalls. So what are some of the early mistakes that you see organizations making trying to actually scale without evolving the operational model around it?
Mm. Yeah, I think there's probably three or four things that immediately come to mind. We're still very stuck in cost containment. It's what we've always known. It's how we've always executed, and it's the easiest. And for us on this call, we know we have increasing budget pressure every year, and so the expectation is that you do more with less. But we focus on cost containment, and it's going to sort of derail some of the possibilities that I see with this new technology, particularly when you keep in mind people and process. Beyond that, I see sort of this underestimating of the importance of starting small, learning and iterating quickly. Sometimes we take a swing and we swing for the fences, probably because we're focused on cost containment, and sort of starting small, learning and iterating will get you where you want to go in a more responsible way. You'll look back a year from now, you'll be in a very different place. But I think too many times we underestimate the power of starting small, particularly in a contact center where small changes can lead to some very disproportionate positive outcomes. Um, the other thing is this sort of failure to recognize the critical importance of the AI human collaboration. We still have that sort of binary either or mindset where it's either human agent or automation. Those two things do not coexist. And what that looks like is if the automation doesn't handle it, let's give it off to the human agent. And then there goes many, many of your benefits. And I think it's time for us to sort of take steps to make this a foundational element of this new AI first operating framework. And part of that is because we still go into these new AI deployments as this sort of incremental feature rather than deeply integrated into these redesigned workflows and customer journeys.
So I think you hit on some of the answers to a couple to the last questions I have, and so maybe you can let me know if I'm missing something. So, last two questions I had for you is what differentiates organizations that create AI responsibly from those that create new risk? And the other question I had was, what does mature human AI collaboration look like beyond simple escalation? I think you answered most of that. What did
Yeah.
I miss?
No, I think you're right. I think those two things are very related. And I see the role of the human in the AI as the enabler of all the promises that we read about in the headlines specific to agentic AI. And so I just want to underline, this isn't about eliminating human jobs. It's about elevating the work we do to create these breakthrough outcomes. Don't underestimate the power that these technology solutions will deliver, especially when you take the time to lay this strong foundation. You're keeping in mind people in process, not just bolting on this technology. It will deliver, but the last thing I would say is the time to get started is probably yesterday. If you're not already started, you don't already have your AI strategy, you're not working with your C-suite on this governance council, the time to get started is now. Start small, learn and iterate, and a year from now, you'll be amazed at how far you've come.
I think, yeah, that's the guardrail. It's like start now, but make it small.
That's right.
Don't try to eat the whole cake. Uh, Not a good thing. So, Chris, we had a couple questions that were in the chat, and I think you hit really most of those as well. Without one of them getting into the very details of how we're talking about managing this agent supervisor performance. So, I'm sure you have more insights on that somebody can follow up on. And so, before we get into our panel, and before I forget, how do people get in touch with you if they have additional questions?
Yeah, I would love to take any and all questions. If you'll reach out to me on LinkedIn, love to connect there. And you can always email me, carnold@asap.com. Always happy to help if you need getting unstuck with any particular problem or you want to talk more roadmap. I'm always here and happy to help anyone.
Chris, thank you very much. I appreciate you participating, and you're going to hang around and be part of our panel as well. So we're actually going to bring on a couple other special guest speakers with us for this upcoming panel. So while that is happening, I would also like to share with everybody that a lot of the things that we're talking about in this transformation, redesign, and everything else, and impacting an experience is internal and external. It's that employee experience as well as that customer experience. So us being, more familiar with all of this transition and all this change that's going through, because it's never going to end. The rate of change is increasing at an ever increasing rate. We have to learn something that's called the phone factors, which is how does that impact our change process? So phone stands for fear, overconfidence, negative impressions, and execution blindness. And we write more about that, and you can get a report on it so that you can understand and approach these things in a way by which it doesn't create a toxic environment for you. Because first of all, you're not going to be able to transform if your environment is already toxic, and it definitely won't transform if you create one. So on to our panel. We need to get everybody on. If we can make that happen, please. So we have Laurent Pierre. Laurent, good to see you. And Sonia. Sonia, please help me with the pronunciation of your last name so I don't mess it up.
Thank you so much, Jim. You can call me Sonia Tamarkar. In India, I'm from India. So in India, we say Tamarkar. So is it Tamarkar or Tamarkar? That sounds perfect. No problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Okay, so in the next 45 minutes, we're actually going to tackle one of the most consequential shifts happening in business right now, the complete reinvention of the contact center. So actually, it's going to take more like 4 or 5 years in this transformation process, but we're going to cover it all in 45 minutes. So we have a big task on our hands. Okay, gang? All right. So this is not a refresh, not an upgrade. It's a reinvention that we're all going through. We're in it together, and we can survive it, and we can thrive it together. Okay, here's the truth. The contact center that most organizations ran 5 years ago is obsolete. And we can't continue, or we have to actually look for a new system. And we've been talking about systems and changing our systems throughout today. We've moved from IVRs to chatbots, from chatbots to co-pilots. not the branded kind. So we have assistants, right? We have agents, and now we're standing at the edge of something far more powerful, and that is an agent workforce, right? And it can resolve potentially the entire customer journey end to end without a human ever touching the conversation. For some of us, that's just not going to be possible, and that's something we have to recognize as well, based on the business that we're in. Everybody is unique. So one of the things that when I work with my clients, I share with them that everybody has a snowflake formula. What is the unique thing about snowflakes? For those of you who are familiar with snowflakes, they're all unique, right? So while we may be talking about agents in a standard way, contact centers in a standard way, everybody has a snowflake formula. We've got to figure ours out. All right. So this isn't about cost. This isn't about cutting. This isn't about slicing, dicing. It's about how do we actually impact an experience internally and externally, right? Because that's what causes profitability, revenue, competitive stance. So we're going to walk through 5 focus topics: autonomous AI agents, scaling conversational AI from pilots to enterprise, the evolving AI human workforce, balancing automation with empathy in CX, and finally, measuring real business impact while ensuring governance and trust. Each segment will be about 5-6 minutes for discussion and followed up by a brief audience Q&A at the end. So again, use that capability within the tool. If your question is actually something that cannot be covered and we don't get to it, I know all of these people. I've had the opportunity to meet with them, and I know they're open. As Chris has already said, same thing with Laurent and Sonia. I know they're here to help. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you,
So
Jim.
first off, ladies first. Sonia, she is the director of CX and brings the perspectives of being somebody who focuses on customer expectations and focuses on retail businesses. She also focuses on process frameworks and thank you for being here. And then we have Laurent Pierre, who is the Senior Vice President of Global Customer Support at Precisely, and a very extensive background in leadership and working with multiple different organizations, and he'll get into that in a second. And then Chris, we had the opportunity to share some time with. If you're brand new and just joined in this session, he is the VP of Customer Contact Center Strategy at ASAP. Spent years starting as an agent and then has walked a journey, and now he's helping multiple organizations with them being able to go through this change that we're all going through. So welcome again. We're going to dive into those operational strategies. We're going to going into the human elements. And so for first, I'm following our flow. Sonia, because I think of people a lot. Sorry about that. I'm thinking of people in the room and grounding it reality. We've seen chatbots, and a lot of those bots frustrated customers. So my first question is, what does a truly autonomous AI agent look like in a contact center today? Not a demo, not a roadmap, but something you've actually seen or built.
So thank you so much for that question. So let me just quickly give one line introduction about myself. I work in retail, so I see firsthand that AI is only useful if it actually helps customer to have a faster and makes life easier, not only for customer, also for associate. So at store level, I think the goal is very simple: less busy work and better service. So how flawless service can be provided and more time for real human interaction. That is what we are looking for. So when we talk about the resolution, or you said autonomous resolution, so I think agentic AI, you must have all heard about agentic AI. That sounds fascinating. But in real, and actually in real, retail, the reality means AI that can take action instant and more prompt by just giving a proper suggestion to a human. For example, if a customer is asking, about a return or about a shipping, status, what is happening, or maybe having a product information, so AI can help to resolve that problem or prompt the notification more faster than human looking and checking the data. So I think AI should be available to resolve a simple stuff very quickly. So our associates, whoever is on the floor working in the store, they can focus in another human touch, and it's a more human to human connection that always matter. And I think personalization that will help. So yeah, I think agentic AI in retail is already being discussed for return, for tracking orders, and also the inventory plays a very important role. So I think and price optimization. So I think it's overall we have a very good practice, and it's not just a buzzword, it's actually practical work.
But when you start talking about the practical application components of it, was that from a timeline perspective, what can people expect?
I think it's more prompt services. So in terms of practical approach, I think it cut down like 50 to 70%. If I talk about from human to AI, so definitely it's ROI will be much more higher than having a human working and tracking all those orders than AI.
So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so Laurent, if you could just also give, like I had mentioned, you have an extensive background, just kind of hit on that for a
Sure.
second, and then see if you can share some of your experiences in this area.
Absolutely. So, Laurent Pierre, I've been in the technology industry for probably close to 3 decades now. I worked for IBM for a good portion of that time, Microsoft, Nielsen IQ, and some other companies as well. And I think when I think about what's happening technology-wise in the industry and around the globe from an agentic and autonomous resolution perspective, here precisely we talk about ownership a lot. Ownership not only by our leaders, but with the technologies that we deploy. Our chief data officer put out a blog post the other day about the business leaving babies at the IT doorstep without any instructions and hoping that they will feed and nurture it. And so one of the things that we've done here from a support and operations perspective is that we make sure that when we're deploying something, that it's supportable, that we can track it, we can measure it, but more importantly, that it's actually doing the things that we designed it to do. And if it's not, we make those hard decisions of saying either it's not ready, and we pull it down, or we don't deploy it at all. And I think that's an important piece that people are missing, that a lot of executives are pushing, let's get an AI thing out and let's get something so we can look like we're doing something AI. But really, what problem were you trying to solve is really the first step. Is your data ready? Is your operation ready? And more importantly, is what you're deploying going to actually help in resolving customer issues or add additional friction in the system? If you take a look at, for example, even 5, 10 years ago, when a customer calls, what's your account number? What's your name? What's this? What's that? Today, we have the technology to actually authenticate a customer, know what they've been searching for, and also from a precisely perspective, we now know when a customer comes to our site, searches for something, and doesn't find it, and we have our agents looking and can tell us, okay, there are 100 searches. 20 of these didn't result in a resolution for the customer. Let's go fill that knowledge gap. Before, that used to be a manual and human effort, where now we're actually having our agents going around and looking at the experience as it's happening, and we're fixing it week over week, not quarter by quarter or every 6 months, but this is kind of a live feedback that we're getting. And I think that's where we're moving towards, where if we deploy it correctly, we have the right guardrails in place. We're basically redesigning that experience, not only internally, but from the minute the customer hits our support portal and at what their experience is, so we can actually keep getting better and getting better without having that friction that ends up in the dreaded phone call that we're all trying to avoid.
Okay, so to me, and Chris, if you could help us when you start talking about working with other organizations, Sonia and Laurent were talking about, the journey and being able to resolve and be able to not repeat and all of those things. What are you seeing with the many organizations that you're working with at ASAP?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we deal with, the largest enterprises in the world, we deal with companies of all shapes and sizes, and we know that we're processing massive tens of millions, maybe 100 million interactions, over time. And if I were to, this is an oversimplification, but I think it's helpful to contrast sort of where we've been with the more deterministic virtual assistants, pretty good at handling the easy interactions. But if you think about how these agentic solutions handle the easy interactions, I would say that they're more conversational. They have a significantly greater ability to understand the countless ways customers communicate whatever they're trying to achieve, which is sort of what has highlighted the brittleness of the virtual assistants, those deterministic. They can't handle the dynamic nature of how humans say things. Interactions are still getting resolved the first time, but in a more personalized manner. And that's usually enabled by, the dynamic data set that powers the agentic solutions. Now, from a complex interaction perspective, and this is what I think everybody understands, is that these more generative solutions, the agentic solutions, this is where I'm seeing the greatest advancement. Traditional technologies can't handle the complexity, so they escalate the full interaction to the human agent. This is where I'm seeing automation truly change the game. The operational change is a fundamental change in the role of the human agent. Rather than managing 100% of the interaction, as I mentioned in the previous session, the human stands ready to help the AI when it reaches a sticking point. Think critical decisions such as deviations from policy, compliance, regulatory requirements, or just plain old judgment calls where empathy plays a role in the CX. As more and more of these interactions are being handled by the AI, the workforce is moving into these supervisory roles. And honestly, it's what human agents have been hoping for a very long time.
Okay, Chris, I think you actually did a excellent segue into what the next question was when we started talking about scaling conversational AI from pilots to the enterprise. Awesome job. Okay, so but when you start talking about um, that and doing that scale, what typically breaks?
Hmm. So if you think about pilots, they're typically very well thought out, or at least we hope they are, and they're time bound. So these are displays of what the technology can do, usually on a target use case or two, or what we might call an intent. So it's very limited in terms of what we're learning. And what I'm seeing as enterprises scale, very quickly it becomes apparent that people and process factor into the plan as much as the tech itself. And understanding the importance of applying the AI as an operating framework rather than just a new feature is critical to success. And the enterprises I see getting the most out of their AI deployments are those who took three critical steps before they expanded, like beyond the first few use cases. So coming out of the pilot to avoid the pitfalls that you just mentioned, AI governance, and we can talk more about what that really means. AI governance needs to be established. It's a top-down decision that we are not going to repeat the sins of the past by having departmental silos get in the way. Customer journeys need to be mapped. I'm always amazed at the enterprises I work with that have no idea beyond Happy Path what their customer journey looks like. They don't know where the fragmentation exists. They don't know where first contact resolution is breaking down consistently. And it's really important that we map out these customer journeys. And then the third thing is really a gap. Workforce communication, where we've just heard AI is coming for our jobs. Top down, there needs to be a coherent AI strategy and it needs to be communicated. And then part of that is having a meaningful upskilling plan for the existing workforce. That all of those need to be in place to really make sure we don't just treat AI as the next feature that's going to change the world.
So, Sonia, when you think about scaling, what comes to your mind?
So I think the moment we say scaling, it's just like, I think every company starts with a small AI. And when I say companies, like, any small businesses, or also actually we ourselves in daily life, we started using AI so much. Even just to plan our, outing, we go with the AI and ask to, have a nice time plan for us to go out. So I think that's like, starting from the small to bigger scale. That's a scaling. So how and which all small part of it we are covering, and how big we can think of. Like, like when I was talking about the business, if I talk about business, it starts with the customer. We always go with the customer first. So customer experience, then you have a HR, then you have a, all this housekeeping, and then you have inventory. That is the scale. So which all part of it is covered, that's a scalable. And I think we are all seeing pilot programs. I have seen a lot of pilot programs. It's an amazing demo that sometimes it gets awkward when if it's not, fulfilling. But at the same time, that's the reality. When we have a touch point with a small understanding about all the groundwork. If we know what exactly it's having in real life, and in the on the store, on the, shop floor. So I think scaling feels more like teamwork, I will say, wherein project team, they share and they are more comfortable, and the team who is on the shop floor, they are sharing all this problem and getting the resolution. So I think that teamwork, that can take over. So yeah.
So Laurent, I mean, dealing with the organizations that you've worked with, and when you start thinking about scaling, what does that mean to you?
And Watson at IBM. If I could take a quick journey there. So we were at a place where we had 16 different business units that we needed to deploy. And of course, every business unit over the last 50 years, imagine we're switching from the mainframe, going to Salesforce and Medallia and Watson and support right after the Jeopardy debut. And we're trying to figure out how we do this. And so the biggest thing that we ran into wasn't the actual tech. It was the processes that were built in that people have put in each business unit, and it was the people that who weren't ready for it, right? And so the messy part of this is that everyone was focused on the tech, and they were focused on the processes that we would all adopt across the board, and forgot about the people. So the tech was deployed, the new processes were put together, but what no one accounted for was the fact that the old processes that we had in place weren't ready for the automation that was coming. And so it fell flat the first 6 months, if you will. And so what we had to do is go back and make sure that our taxonomy was the same, that our policy logic made sense, that the knowledge governance that were in 16 business units had to be one IBM at that point. And so when you take a look at those three pillars of people, process, and tech, if those three things were problematic before you tried to deploy AI, they're only going to get exacerbated if you don't fix it. And so to fast forward to how we got past that problem is we established clear APIs. We put some functional governance, and I know that we've been talking about that today, but more importantly, we took an approach that says we're not going to deploy across 16 business units. We're going to deploy one model, one set of processes, and a clear set of KPIs that we're all going to be held to. And once we broke through all of the 16 silos, that's when you start to see Watson working in DB2, Watson working in MQ series, and all the different software areas because we all adopted that same path, that same methodology. Otherwise, it would have been years before we saw any of the success from when we deployed Watson.
Okay, so we are sitting here and we're talking about and looking at the topic, and it's AI tech and all those types of things, but I'm hearing us talk about people more than anything, and how the readiness components and how the adoption components and all of those things, even when we start even talking about the whole process piece, it's people needing to follow a process. So it's really interesting, and part of what we had talked about is the AI human workforce, co-pilots, agents, and productivity. And since we have talked a lot about the people components, Sonia, when we start talking about experience, and I had mentioned the whole internal experience and external experience, we know they're linked. They're directly connected. We can get away with a break or separation in the two, maybe just for a little while. However, if they're not aligned in the long term, we're going to have problems. When we start talking about this whole people element and the scaling and the transformation and all that, what would you say was one surprise that you didn't expect?
Um, One surprise in terms of scaling AI, or
When we start talking about the human workforce and
okay,
the
Popeyes.
augmentation of change. Yeah,
I think when we talk now, working with AI should be feel like having a super smart, sidekick. It's not a bossy robot. It's AI should not be a co-pilot. It should be like a co-pilot, not a CEO. It's sometime we think like, oh, whatever AI is doing, it's again,
sure.
it's
Well,
made
but
by
what
human.
surprised you as you were going through this process in regards to all of this transformation that you didn't necessarily expect in regards to the whole um
I think
go
there,
ahead.
there was a moment where actually there was a moment, a lot of things which I actually that was interesting, wherein the tone, the tone modulation, and there was one of the part wherein AI can understand how upset is the customer, and how, the escalation part. That was something which was I was amazed to know that AI can detect how critical is the customer problem is, and that got escalated to a higher level immediately. That notifications reaches that customer is extremely happy or extremely upset with the order not being delivered, or order being uh, not getting returns, money back, or something like that. That was surprising. That was like, wow. I think that is something. It's just like, I think it's beyond imagination, I will say. But now I can see a lot of creativity which is coming, and I think it's now focusing on more empathy, not only just robotic, and I can see that. So it's a great job.
So, okay, so that was a good surprise from the tech perspective. What surprised you from the people perspective?
I think people perspective is like, I will say, at the first end, uh, it's always like, scary part, saying that AI will replace us. And the moment team member understands that AI is not replacing you, AI is here to help us and support us to enhance our productivity of our work, and it actually cut down our workload. So I think that was something which I can say, yeah.
That's good. Okay, so Chris, again, working with a lot of different organizations, what are some of the things where they're saying what they were actually surprised in regards to the AI human workforce and all of the productivity elements?
Yeah, I think if I think back over the last 18 months, the probably the single most surprising thing, and it's really both the enterprise's surprise and my surprise, is how quickly the technology is evolving that gets us to a place where consumers do not mind interacting with the automation. If we're honest, 18 months ago, the voice quality, the ability of the AI to actually interact in a non sort of, ineffective way wasn't where it needed to be. But in 18 months, we're in a completely different place. We've got more APIs that are providing more data. We've got cleaned up knowledge bases, and all of this sort of these efforts over the last 18 months, coupled with how much the automation has matured in terms of sort of the humanness of the voice, the ability to have a very personalized conversation. The main surprise is how quickly consumers have opened up to be willing to work with the technology. We know there's been resistance in the past, but I'm convinced that Humans don't have to speak to humans. They largely want to speak to humans because the technology we've deployed in the past just didn't work. But as we have increasingly deployed technologies that are actually solving problems in a very personalized way that reduces consumer effort, they are more than willing to engage with automation.
I think problems to be solved, solving the problems, all of those. I think you're right. I think that for all of us, that's ultimately what our goal is, right? So, Laurent, you talk so eloquently, about going through and leveraging the tech, being able to apply the tech, going through, talking about working with multiple different silos.
Sure.
So, what surprised you from the people perspective in regards to all of this transformation?
So I have two perspectives, right? I have the Watson story perspective and kind of my experience here precisely. So when we were deploying, two things that we didn't account for. One was the resistance was not only strong, there were some pockets of the support organization that were literally sabotaging Watson learning what a good answer was. And what I mean by that is a accurate answer at an 85% confidence level, support agents were saying, no, that's the wrong answer. And it wasn't until 3 or 4 months later we couldn't figure out why Watson wasn't improving. And we determined that we had pockets of the organization that were literally telling Watson that the answer was wrong when it was right, right when it was wrong, because of fear of what we've been talking about, that their job was going to get eliminated. And so once we started digging in and started auditing, and I had my SMEs go in there and look, that's when we looked and we said, wait, this is the right answer that Watson gave. Why did this person mark it wrong? And it took us probably 4 months to figure that out around the whole organization. And then we started to say, listen, here's what we want Watson to do. Solve the things like the password resets, the license keys back then, and things of that nature. And we want you to focus on those hard cases, those things that require your 20 years of expertise. And so please, let's stop sabotaging Watson, because here's a group that just eliminated 20% of their tickets of password resets per day so that they could focus on higher level work. So we had some re-educating to do, but also some campaigning to do with the team as well, to show that, look, if you want to keep doing password resets, go ahead, but that's what we're trying to solve. We're trying to get you to focus on Sev 1s and Sev 2s while Watson's doing Sev 3s and Sev 4s. And that was the breakthrough that nobody accounted for. And I think the second piece as well was we underestimated the relationships that our customers had 15, 20 years in with our support agents, where they're like, Laurent, I'm not interested in using your chat bot or whatever you have. I want to go talk to Jack, or I want to go talk to Karen, or I want to go talk to Jim, because they know what they're doing. I don't have time to mess around there. And so we had a multi-generational problem to solve as well as we were deploying Watson, because there were some customers who were adamant they're not going to use it. They had zero interest. And we're talking our Fortune 100s here. Okay. And so that's when we made the decision that we said, you know what? We're going to meet the customers where they're at and focus on those who want to help us get Watson better, who want to use the tech, and slowly sort of transition those who are adamant that they don't want to use the tech. And oh, by the way, those folks still exist today. It's just that I would say the noise is less today when I look at the Precisely footprint and how customers are interacting than when I was deploying Watson back in 2017, 2018. And so the story today at Precisely is that right now, when a customer comes to our portal to search, 70% of the time they get a resolution. And so just imagine that scale that we had when I first joined about a year and a half ago. We were sort of experimenting and looking, but when we turned on Gen AI last summer, we saw a massive jump of customers who were not opening up tickets and solving problems on their own. And that's when we knew we were onto something. And it's been a accelerated journey since then.
Laurent, that was one of those unsung, uncovered nuggets that I think for so many people when we're going through this transition, you'll want to know about and want to remember. So if you didn't note what he was just talking about, that whole human in the middle thing, crucial, because no matter, we're dealing with human beings, and some just may sabotage, and it can happen. So auditing and understanding and assessing the process and all of that is something that we just have to be mindful of. And here's the thing: That is a total human response. It's not some people
Absolutely.
that we should terminate. It's it's the system, right? It's just a system issue. And so if we have the right system in place and we do, a concerted effort across all those things, including the communication, making sure, and what is it? What did they, what does they say? Trust but verify, right? Trust but verify. It's going to make a
That's right.
significant difference in your success. So thank you for sharing that. Okay. All right. So part of what we were, where we were going to roll into is the whole CX transformation and talking about the whole empathy component. And we've hit on this quite a bit. I mean, Sonia, you even talked about the whole sensitivity and all of that and understanding, when an escalation, needed to occur and the solving of that and the surprising. So yes, Chris, you talked about 18 months ago versus today. The empathy is a very different um, type of analysis or review than it used to be from a product perspective. Um, and so when we start looking at this transformation, the automation, and I don't want to repeat some of the things that we have already covered. And so the questions I have would have done that. I actually want to take it to the next level. So Sonia, when you start thinking about where I want this to go and I'm excited about, what does that mean to you?
I think I only focus on three things, people, process, and presentation. So, how is this three things in place? So, when my all the if I talk about customer experience transformation, or we are talking about AI, how AI is helping human and business, and how it's helping. We talk a lot about NPS. The moment we say customer experience, it comes with the NPS. What is the score? What is the promoter score? So it's all about process. If it's all the process is in place, and if our people is having smooth and flawless operations. So if AI is helping us to have the process more smoother, and of course, it's like, the presentation about overall. When I talk about presentation, it's not only about the store presentation, it's all overall presentation when we talk about the AI driven chatbot. So, AI driven chatbot, it's not only recommending you about our product, also recommending and upselling our product. So if you, for example, if you are just looking at Balenciaga bag, and it will say that, hey, I know this is what it's matching, or something like, upselling those product to our customer. So I think it's kind of personal. When I talk about retail, it's like, more style and luxury collections. So how it's mixing the personalization and having delivering the style to our customer. So that is something which I would say.
Thank you for sharing. So I'm actually going to go to Laurent on this one, so because I want Chris to close because he's working with a lot of different organizations.
Sure.
Laurent, what are you excited about in regards to this?
Oh, we don't have time today, but we're excited here at Precisely because we're forging some new paths that we haven't tried before. And so I would say so I have a small but nimble support ops team and a very, very strong leadership team where we're focused on automating our tasks, but not the human emotion. And what I mean specifically by that is that in order for the level of empathy that customers experience with a solid a support engineer, right? We want that experience to carry through when they're using our tech. And so sentiment analysis and being able to look at how a conversation is going to be able to insert a human or route the customer to a human without the customer saying escalate, escalate, speak to an agent and all the things that we experience today. That is part of the next wave or next generation of what we're looking at. Because like I said, it's not like we're waiting for the tech. The tech is here. The choices are how do we implement it so that A, we don't cause friction in the system, and then B, we don't have a reputational risk where we're introducing really bad tech to our customers and completely destroying the customer experience. And I think that what's exciting me the most, I would say, is that I can see like based on what my team's working on in the lab, that our ability to route the customer appropriately, to identify the sentiment in the case, to prevent an escalation, the ability for us to insert a human, not because we ran a report, because the system alerted a manager that, hey, this support person needs help. Let's go in and do that. Like those are the kind of things that really excite me because I don't know that we will get to the point where the humans, the technology will make a human feel warm and fuzzy. But I think to the points that we've been making today, we have to make sure that the interaction with the tech has to lead to an outcome, right? And it has to lead to something that actually solves the reason why the customer came to us in the first place, but also leave room for us to be able to insert ourselves in the process altogether. And I think it shouldn't be awkward. It should be seamless. It's kind of like follow the sun when the US is going to bed or coming off shift and we're doing warm transfers of a certain number of cases that need APAC to pick up. That's the kind of sentiment that I want to introduce this year as part of what our customers are experiencing.
Thanks for sharing that. Chris, so again, you have a lot of different voices, a lot of different perspectives that you're actually capturing. If you could kind of elevate them into one thing, what are maybe even you at ASAP, excited about it and what's coming, but what are you hearing? And maybe if those two things come together, that's great. But share, what's the excitement about?
Yeah, I think, to get to the excitement, there's a lot of demystifying that has to happen. For a long time, we've sort of lived with these, I'll call them myths, so I spend a lot of time myth busting, even at the C level, where like I've mentioned before, we've sort of existed with this binary mindset where it was either voice or digital. It was, either human agent or automation. And ultimately, the cumulative effect of that was it was either reduction in cost or improved satisfaction. And so, with today's technology, everything we're talking about, we finally have the unlock in front of us where it's not either or, it's we get to have both. So I think about the ASAP customer experience platform. It's not this black box where all this magic happens and it spits out this customer experience. It is a transparent box where you see everything that comes in. And so whether it's voice or it's digital, it's human or it's automation, it comes in and its only purpose is to improve both the customer and employee experience in a way that drives shareholder value, which is ultimately what, as leaders of the business, we're all on the hook for shareholder value. This is the first time in my career where all of these things are coming together, but it can't be done with just the technology. It's what Laurent has said twice, it's people and process. We keep reiterating. But for the first time, I see the opportunity for us to completely transform the way contact centers and more broadly CX has sort of been very underwhelming. We've invested millions upon millions of dollars in new innovation over the last 2 decades for what? Flat or declining customer experience scores. We now have the opportunity to unlock that. And if I'm honest, you think about in our contact center, we have a lot of unhappy agents. These are very, very hard jobs. They're entry level. Training usually isn't great. They're super high stress because customers aren't calling to tell us what a great job we're doing. For the first time, humans can supervise the AI who's really holding down a very hard conversation with the customer. They're providing guidance to the AI instead of the other way around. And so instead of human agents coming in, going through 6 weeks of training, getting stuck on a call with a very angry customer, and now all of a sudden asking, how quickly can I get off this phone? Now they want to do these jobs. And so now we're addressing systemic issues like absenteeism and attrition, things that we've been running after in the workforce model for so long. The technology is unlocking that. And the companies that I see doing this best, starting small, learning, iterating, and then growing over time, eventually, they're moving these full-time human agents into these, what I call human in the loop agent roles, where they are migrating from these full-time roles to these supervisory roles in increasing fashion as more and more of these interactions get automated. In a year from now, 2 years from now, the contact center is going to look completely different, and it's going to address virtually all of the systemic issues that we've been working against for 2 decades.
I want to thank you all for your participation and sharing of your experience and insights today. Has been extremely impactful. So the last segment that I had mentioned that we were going to cover, we did cover, which was talking about measuring business impact as well as responsible AI. And one of the questions that we had was about security and risk management. And I think we really actually hit all that without getting into the specific details about it. Again, I know I'm going to speak for everybody on this panel is that all of us, if you want follow-up questions, are available via LinkedIn. And so I actually want to take a moment and close this out. And I also want to mention, man, I've been looking at the numbers of people who actually signed in and who are still here, and the numbers are still solid. I mean, a lot of times you get drop off. And so what does that tell me? These people have provided significant amount of value. So giving them a hand clap and saying thank you would be well worth it and well earned. Okay, so agentic AI isn't just a technology upgrade. That's an important thing for us to remember. First of all, it's optional, right? Everybody has a snowflake formula. We got to figure ours out. It is operational. It's cultural. It's about systems and redesign. Our system that we have learned, and this is an important point, all of us are in something that's new. The system that we've been using, and for me, it's 3 decades, has to be redone. Now, there's a lot of fear and human things associated with that because I could sit here and say, oh my gosh, I'm now unskilled because I have to do something different. And that could drive me crazy. And it's driving your people crazy too. I now have to learn new ways of doing things. And that goes for all of us leaders as well. We have to change our lens. Human agent isn't going away. Their responsibility is going to become more important, and the complexity in their knowledge and understanding is going to continue to gain. So hopefully they'll be higher paid, because we even mentioned low paid. Some of these are going to be pretty significantly paid because they're skill levels. And then we need to move past the whole thoughts of butts and seats and cost reduction. Those days are over. The real ROI is about relationships and impact and connection and revenue. And those are all possible now. As Chris talked, we can unlock things that we just couldn't unlock before. So thank you to everybody who joined us live. Again, follow up with everybody that's here. A recording will be available shortly via email. Feel free to share it with your team, your leadership, and any of your people who are in the industry, because there were a lot of nuggets and a lot of value that was delivered here. It's time for us to rethink what we've been doing and what we need to do. Connect with our panelists, like I said, on LinkedIn. Keep the conversation going. And thank you for joining us today. Thanks to ASAP. Thanks to Techsommet. Y'all take care.